Hello everyone, I'm Best Friend Skull, and welcome back to Risk of Rain. Today we're going over something a little different. As of a few days ago, the game updated to 1.0.3, aka the Artifact Update. This update adds in 10 new thingamahoojits to find throughout the game. There's one on each map, and each one is a sort of condition to place upon your playthrough. You pick one at the very beginning, and then it changes everything, essentially, giving you various conditions. Let's go over each one now, shall we? First off, we have the Artifact of Honor. This artifact is unlocked by going into the Desolate Forest and finding this small little cubbyhole. As a note, each of these artifacts are found on each map, and they have different spawn locations, and if the map does not generate in the proper way, then you won't be able to find them. For this one in particular, you need some form of jump boost. In this case, I have the Photon Jetpack, in order to get through that little tunnel. Or you can be the miner. Or you can have two Rusty Jetpacks. All of those work. What the Artifact of Honor actually does is it makes every single enemy in the game spawn as elites. Keep in mind, there are some that do not have elite versions. For example, jellyfish. They cannot spawn as elites because there is no elite jellyfish. There's something a little bit odd about this one as well, because it seems to make evident that the game has an ingrained programming to say that certain elites are not as powerful as others. As you can see here, before the first minute passes, I'm getting nothing but the green elites, and then the yellow elites and blue elites start spawning, but I don't have a single orange elite on me at all. Or a red one, for that matter. And as such, I believe that they have a bit of a buffer to them, that the game thinks that these ones aren't quite as difficult, so it won't spawn as many of them on you at the very beginning. That said, bosses. Bosses can spawn as elites, always, and yeah, it's a little bit on the harsh side. Next up, we have the Artifact of Kin. This one's found in the dried lake, and there's a small hole in this wall. It's kind of cracked. I'm not exactly sure how the hit detection on this thing works, because I've tried breaking it with the miner and it never worked, but with the bandit and the commando it worked just fine, but with the huntress's arrows, it didn't work. In any case, on the other side we have 3 buttons. These are timed buttons. You have to hit them within a timer in order for the artifact to spawn, but there it is. So, we're good. What the Artifact of Kin actually does is it makes it so that only one type of enemy will spawn in a given map. In this case, we have the the Greater Wisp only being the only one that spawns. And again, there's a bit of a buffer here, because the game considers the Greater Wisp to be the hardest enemy that spawns on the first map. Thus, not many spawn at all. And that's a bit of a boon and a bit of a backfire, because for one thing, you don't have as many things spawning, but at the same time you don't get as much money, so you can't get as many items. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. Next up, we have the Artifact of Distortion. The Artifact of Distortion spawns on the damp caverns, and is relatively hard to get to, actually. You pretty much, again, need to be the miner, or I believe that the commando and huntress can also get to this thing. What you have to do is you have to find this teleporter here. This is usually your indication that an artifact has spawned, is if you find one of these teleporters. And then you have to get over across this gap to this small platform and smack this box. Strangely enough, this box, again, has a relatively odd hitboxing thing to it. It works as Acrid, but I've heard reports that, like, any ranged character can't hit the thing at all. I believe you may need a attack such as Acrids, Handies, the Miners, or the Mercenaries in order to get through this. Namely, one that kind of hits below them. I don't really know precisely. What the Artifact of Distortion actually does is the biggest ass of them all, pretty much. Every minute it locks one of your abilities. In this case, I'm playing as the Enforcer to show off just how much of a gigantic prick this can be. Because in the Enforcer's case, it locks out his shield now and then, and he becomes much, much worse, and almost unplayable, in fact. Very few classes in the game actually will get along with this. For example, like Handy. Handy can't get along with this at all, because his drones will be locked out. The Huntress gets along with it okay. The Sniper doesn't get along with it at all, because he only has 2 attacks, and it'll sometimes limit him to 1. The Commando will sometimes just lose his dodge roll or his ability to use a penetrating shot, and yes, it can lock out your basic attack. So, don't like this one. Next up after that is the Artifact of Spite. The Artifact of Spite is found within the Sky Meadow, and in the Sky Meadow there will be this kind of out-of-place dirt clod. Again, this is like the box in the damp caverns, because you can't really hit it with any horizontal attack. In this case, I'm using the Huntress, and I managed to hit something with an explosive shot directly above the thing, and one of the bombs winds up hitting the little dirt clod. Anyhow, after you do that, you go down into it, and go through this little platforming section, get your artifact, fall off the cliff, and then you're good. What the Artifact of Spite actually does is it makes it so that enemies explode. That's what it says. This isn't a Will-o'-the-Wisp explosion like I thought it would be. No, they explode into cluster bombs, and those cluster bombs are on a timer, and they're a random timer, and they go in random directions, and they deal damage based upon the damage of the thing you killed, and they have... and the amount of them that, you know, fly out are based upon the thing you killed's health. And as such, this thing right here goes and explodes into an awful lot of stuff. Something funny to note with this thing, though, is that if you use ghosts, then when the ghosts despawn or they die, they will explode into cluster bombs that are actually on your side. So, there's a neat little thing. After that, we have the Artifact of Glass, one of my personal favorites, and also one of the ones that we knew would be coming, in a way. This teleporter's been here for a while now, but we never knew what its purpose was, but now we do. First off, there's this little cubby over here. You go into the hole, you fall down, and then we have another button timer thingy. This one's a lot harder than the one on Dried Lake, because there are 5 buttons, and they are significantly farther apart. And the final button there, had I not had the photon jetpack while I was doing this, would actually make it so that I would have to start the entire puzzle over again if I went down to the 5th button and didn't have a way of coming back, and failed. But anyways, after you're done with the whole thing, a little blip noise will happen, and you go down, grab your artifact, and you're good. What the Artifact of Glass actually does, it makes it so that you deal 500% damage, so 5 times as much damage, but have 10% health, so 1/10 the normal amount. For most classes, this is 12. You have 12 health at the beginning of the game, which means essentially you can endure, like, 1 attack from a basic enemy, like a jellyfish or a Lemurian. Fortunately enough, you'll level up enough to get this relatively offset, and in all honesty, this is one of my personal favorites, because you can take some pretty severe advantage of it, particularly with a class like, say, the Bandit, which makes it so that I can do this. The Dance of Invisibility. The Bandit's little thing just becomes so much more useful when you do 500% damage. As a note with this thing as well, this affects your stats, and as such it affects your drones. So your drones deal insane amounts of damage as well, but are also insanely fragile. So, double-edged sword in pretty much every sense of the term. Now we have the Artifact of Enigma. The Artifact of Enigma is found in the Sunken Tombs. Over here, you'll notice that there's something kind of out of place down underneath you. What you have to do is you have to go into this tiny hole and pretty much hold right, and you bounce up. Just like that. There's bounce pads hidden under there. I guess they wanted to make you paranoid or something. And then you go through, grab your artifact, fall into a pit, and you're good. What the Artifact of Enigma actually does, it gives you a use item at the very beginning of the game. Problem with the use item is it has a random use item effect when you use it. This can seriously result in your death because the lost doll is a use item. It can also make it so that sometimes you use the Explorer's Key without ever intending to, and then your use item's on a 90-second cooldown. And sometimes it'll give you a chest from the Captain's Brooch that you can't afford. And sometimes it'll make you invulnerable when there's nothing around, and sometimes it does a lot of different things. The other thing that this does is it makes it so that use items no longer spawn. Instead, anytime that a use item would have spawned, you get a small enigma, which reduces the cooldowns of your use items. Not by that much, though. I believe it is a percentage. I'm not sure what the percentage is, and it's a relatively small one, probably 5. The other thing worth noting with this is that, no, you can't farm small enigmas off of the Captain's Cabin chest. You just can't. It actually will give you a use item, which is kind of nice, actually. The Artifact of Sacrifice is found within the Magma Caverns, and in order to find this one, you have to go to the middle and go to the left. You'll check to see if there's a teleporter there. If there is, that means the thing spawned. This is another button puzzle, but this one's different. These buttons are not timed. These buttons are permanent. Once you hit them, they are hit. That is the end of it. Problem being, they're hidden. There's 3 of them. And they're all behind walls. You need some form of penetrating shot to get to these things. And I'm not sure which attacks work for this. I'm fairly sure that Handy's Hurt works. I know that the Huntress's Explosive Shot works, because that's what I'm using here. And essentially you find the 3 of them, you hit them all, and then you get yourself your artifact. What the Artifact of Sacrifice actually does... I hate this artifact so much. As you can see, it says chests no longer spawn. Instead, enemies drop items. It doesn't say how often they drop items, or what kind of items they drop. Namely, that they don't drop off items very often at all, and the items that they drop are usually white items, because it considers them all to be small chests, essentially. And, thus, you wind up with a lot of issues. This is actually fairly good for speedrunning, but that's about it. Next up is the Artifact of Command. The Artifact of Command is found within the Hive Cluster. Going up to the top right, you'll find this tiny purple platform, and then you'll go up over here and see that there are a lot of disappearing ropes. Don't worry, this isn't a disappearing block puzzle like in Mega Man or anything like that. These just fade out of existence but are still there. They're just invisible. So you climb across, or do what I did, then just go across with a photon jetpack because fuck it, and then you'll be good. What the Artifact of Command actually does... It says items are no longer random, and it is true to an extent. What it does is it makes it so that every time you would get an item drop, it figures out the rarity of said item, and then gives you a box. Within this box, you pretty much go in there, and there's a menu where you can select what item comes out. I'm personally playing on a controller, and this thing's fucking impossible to control with a controller. I really hope they patch this soon, because this is fucking annoying. And then you get your item, essentially, after you've gotten the rarity of it. Why do I have a problem with this item? I think it makes the game too easy. Here, I'll show you. This is why you don't give anyone that has a good amount of experience with this game and knows how the items work choice of the items that they get. Because you wind up with this. Just this absolute fucking apocalypse. You want to know what I was doing in order to make it so that this happened? I was seriously just holding down my L1 button, or I guess X, and just pressing Z every now and then. That's all I was doing. And everything died. I don't like the Artifact of Command. I kind of refuse to use it unless I'm, like, just grinding for something. If I'm just trying to, like, get the other artifacts, which was what I was doing in this case. Next up, we have the Artifact of Spirit. The Artifact of Spirit is found within the Temple of the Elders. You find it by going down off the right cliff and then doing a little parkour course. The parkour course is actually relatively difficult to do. In this case, I'm kind of cheesing it, but hey, what the hell. And then you get your artifact, you fall down, like a lot of these seem to be, and you're good. What the Artifact of Spirit actually does is one of my favorite artifacts. I actually pretty much play with this on by default now when I play for fun. What it does is, depending upon the amount of health that you or an enemy has lost, they get a movement speed boost. So what this causes is a whole lot of chaos. But very controllable chaos, because they still have to stop in order to attack you. I personally really, really like this one, because it causes everything to kind of go nuts, and I like things going nuts. Last up, we have the Artifact of Origin. The Artifact of Origin is something that I'm going to show off the effect of, but I'm going to leave the way to unlock it for the next extra episode after this coming one. Here's what it does, though. Every 10 minutes, it makes a bunch of imps spawn on your face. And these are actually a new type of enemy. They're pretty much black imps and imp overlords, but they're a little different. I'm not entirely sure how yet, but I'm sure we'll figure that out relatively soon. Keep in mind that I've been playing this update for 4 days. And, yeah. With that, we're done with the artifacts, but also some other things have come into being. For one thing, I'm not sure if this was here before, but there seems to be an invisible rope that you can climb to get to this chest here in the Dried Lake. Not sure if that was there before, but I wound up finding it by accident right here, and I was pretty pleased, actually. That makes this a little bit easier. Another one is that in the Sunken Tombs, this chest has spawned in a weird location. I actually don't know how to get to this thing yet. If anyone could reveal that to me, that would be spectacular, and I'll put it in another update. Now, the thing is that the patch notes for this were apparently actually lost during development, and so they don't know what's going on, what exactly the patch notes are yet, but they'll be getting back to us with that relatively soon, I believe. The other thing is that some of you may have experienced a bug with the Cremator, where he kind of makes everything fuck up. Or the Scavenger. The Scavenger has already been fixed. The Cremator is going to be fixed within the next day, probably, by the time this is posted, and thus, this won't be an issue relatively soon. But with that about covers the update. The next update will still be the Enforcer on Monsoon. And then, after that, we'll kind of cover how to get the Artifact of Origin. Because it's a bit of a bitch. I'll see y'all then.